What's good, family? Welcome to another episode of Rolam Live. My name is Rolam. I am your host, and today I am joined by Jessica Tanner. She's a screenwriter, a screenwriting coach, among other things. Jessica, how you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Jessica, what she does with her screenwriting coaching, and all that good stuff. But before we do that, I love to start with my favorite question that I ask everybody. What is inspiring you right now? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What's getting your creative juices going?
All right. Oh, was that a question for the audience or for
No, that's
me?
for you. That's for you.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, you good. You
So,
good.
So right now I read a lot of things, and right now I have a coach, and she's not a screenwriting coach, but she's actually my business coach, and she has us reading The Miracle Power of Your Mind, and I'm nowhere near done with it because it's such a long book, like 900 and some pages, but it talks about how your mind is so important. Your mind, it can either be your greatest enemy or it can really be your greatest asset.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're feeding your mind every day and that you're renewing your mind. And you have to be mindful of what you watch, what you listen to, what you take personally. So
Mm,
I feel like that's really important too, especially like with business or whatever it is we're doing creatively. We always think about, oh, I have to do these tasks,
right.
but we don't really think about, oh, the emotional part of it, the part with our mind, with our mindset, psychology. So I'm enjoying that book.
You said the miracle power of your mind, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I definitely have to look into that. That sounds like my speed. Um,
It's on Amazon.
yeah, are you reading or are you listening to it?
Oh, I'm reading it. Stuff
Okay,
like
okay.
that. I do have Audible for some things, but if I have to take notes and I really want to make sure that I'm retaining it, I can't really do audiobooks because I feel like I'll miss things.
Mm.
So it's like, I'd rather just read it the old-fashioned way and take notes,
So do you do
highlight
so
things.
you do your fiction on Audible on audio?
Yeah, that's a little easier.
Interesting. So I'm the opposite. So
Oh, really?
I like to listen to like history and like self-development, but I like to read. I get lost if I'm listening to fiction. I get lost. I'm like, wait, who was that character? What
Oh,
happened? What they say?
like what
Uh,
just happened?
right. So I'm the opposite. That's interesting. Um, okay, so for me, what's inspiring me right now? So yesterday I actually completed another draft of a screenplay that I've been working on for about a year. So I have that out to some readers. I got a couple of people to read for me and give me some feedback, some notes. So I'm excited about that. But it's always, once you finish something, for me at least, when I finish something, I'm like, okay, what's next? Right. So I'm moving to like other projects and other things to keep me busy while I'm waiting for, my feedback and all of that. So so that's the major thing I think right now. Also, I've been listening to Post Malone's new
Mm,
album. It's a country album. It's really good. Like,
wow.
I don't know if you like country music, but
No, I do. I actually got introduced to it randomly because between the ages of like 12 to 14, I lived in West Virginia for a little bit, and a lot of my friends listened to country, and I
yeah,
got into it like, oh, wow. Because initially I didn't grow up that way because my family, they listened to a lot of, old school R&B, stuff
right,
like that. So that
right,
was my first time getting introduced to country, and I was like, no, I like this. This is
yeah,
nice.
yeah. Where are you from?
I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland.
Maryland. Okay,
Mhm.
okay, cool. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to add to the what's inspiring you right now? Any other inspirations you want to throw in there? It's cool if not. I just want to make sure before we move on.
For now, that was it, but I'm sure
Okay,
there's gonna be more, like, in the coming
absolutely,
days.
for sure, for sure. Okay, that's great. So now we can just go ahead and move, jump right into the
Mhm.
conversation. The first thing I would love for you to give us, maybe a little bit. I guess I asked where you were from, but more about your origin story, how you got into writing, how you got into, just all the things that you do.
Sure. So I've always been a writer from the age of 6 years old. I always loved reading books. I always loved just writing short stories, making them up, just using my imagination. And I was a nerdy kid. Like I was that bookworm where I would actually get in trouble for reading in class because I would read books that like weren't part of the curriculum.
Right, right, right.
And I remember in the sixth grade, my mom, like, that she had to go to like a parent teacher conference and she was like saying to my teacher, okay, so what's the problem? And my teacher was so frustrated. Like, she keeps reading. And my mom was like, well, isn't that the point of school? She's like, no, no, she's not reading the book that we're reading. She's reading her own thing. And my mom was like, okay, you can't do that. I
Right,
love that you're reading, but you.
right.
So I was that kind of kid. And by the time I got to high school, I started just writing my own short stories in notebooks because one thing I didn't like about high school was that we had no real creative outlet when it came to writing our own stories. It was always just English lit. And I'm not saying we don't need that. Like, of course, we need to learn about English and different things like rhetorical strategies and stuff like that. But we
Right.
also need the creative outlet to create our own.
Hmm.
And I had a lot of artsy friends in high school that were painters, illustrators, and I was the writer of the group. And
Right.
it got to the point where they would even like start acting out the stories I would write. And that got me thinking, like,
Oh,
wow,
wow.
I really want to get into screenwriting. And so when I was in undergrad, I took my first intro course, had no idea what I was doing. I used Microsoft Word to write my first script. Don't ever do
Wow.
that.
Right.
That's like the most tedious thing ever. I know people that do that strangely by choice, but I don't recommend it because it's so tedious to the point where you'll be thinking about the margins and you won't even be
Right.
like in an ease and flow of,
Right.
different states, stuff
Right.
like that.
Right. Right.
So it's a lot with that. But once I got to grad school, that's when I really jumped into screenwriting. I ended up moving to California and I dove right in.
Yeah.
I dove right in and then I started just really learning everything I could learn, networking with people. And at that time, I wasn't thinking about really starting a business. That
Mhm.
didn't happen until later,
Mhm.
once I started working for Coverfly. And that really showed me how to evaluate screenplays. It
Mhm.
showed me, oh, okay, so this is how you break apart a script to see what's working, what's not, what you need to add, what you need to get rid of, whether the dialogue is on the nose. And I feel like that really trained me to
Yeah.
the point where now I can give really thorough notes to my clients. So
Mhm.
I definitely credit my time with Coverfly for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I guess I want to talk a little bit more about how you went from writer to
Mhm.
helping writers, right? Like what was that? What sparked that transition for you?
It was really like working for Coverfly because that was my first taste really of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I really got to see too, like the gap in the industry. I got to see like, oh wow, people are turning in scripts like this because no
Mhm.
lie. I remember one time working for Coverfly, I had to deliver notes and this person had written a 200-page screenplay. And I
Whoa.
was just like, I mean, the good news was I got paid extra, but the bad news was, okay, I couldn't give them anything lower than or higher than a pass.
Right.
So
Right.
I was able to see, oh my gosh, people are doing this. And then people would submit just wild stuff like graphics on the front page. They would have
Mhm.
all these things that weren't necessary. And I was like, wow, people are really doing this.
Mhm.
And they were also doing this with competitions too. I used to be a judge for different competitions as well. And
Mhm.
people would turn in things, and the formatting would be all over the place to where we couldn't even figure out, okay, what's happening in this scene. Like we really
Wow.
don't know. So by default, it was always a pass. And the one thing that I didn't like about working for other people is that I couldn't really connect with my clientele like that because it wasn't my company. So it was always just kind of like my supervisor being a go between. But now with my own company, I can get on a Zoom call and I can coach them face to face virtually. And I can ask them, okay, how were my notes? Were they thorough? Did you understand them? And now I can make sure, oh, did you go into the rewrite with clarity, with a real strategy? And is
Yeah.
that helping you move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and maybe this is redundant, but from the outside looking in, it seems as though, it's not just, oh, you saw a gap in the market, but from, I follow you on Instagram and I see your posts and I see how the information that you're sharing. Like, I mean, I think it was today I got the email from you about, it might not have been today. It was the visual storytelling piece. And I'm like,
Oh,
yo,
yeah.
this is like really good information.
Mhm.
And to me, like, that doesn't just happen for somebody who sees, oh, well, I could jump into this gap. That comes from a passion, right?
Oh,
Like, where
yeah.
does that passion come from to help people? You know what I'm saying?
I would say that passion comes from experience because I remember being that writer, especially in the beginning stage, because I want to make sure I stress this. I didn't even know what I was doing when I first got into my
Yeah.
own screenwriting journey. And everything I teach is really from my own experience. Like when I yell at people, like, okay, you need to outline, I'm not just saying that. I'm saying that from my own experience where, okay, I didn't
You do be
outline.
yelling that. You do be yelling that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, where I tell people, like, you really need to outline because I can't tell you how many people come to me, Jessica, I just have writer's block. I'm stuck in Act Two. And I almost know it's because they didn't outline. They're like, I give up on this. I'm like, wait. Did you outline? Well, no,
Right.
I did. I'm like, exactly. You need to outline. If you don't outline, it's like going into the woods without a map, or it's like
Yeah.
going on a road trip with no GPS. So it's like you're going to be going around in circles because you're not writing with the end in mind. And
Yeah.
the thing about creativity, I love creativity, but something I've also really discovered is that creativity does need structure. And a lot of us fight that. We fight that structure. But to answer your question about helping people, it's so fulfilling to me to help other writers because at the end of the day, I'm a writer as well.
Yeah.
And I wish back then that there had been something like that on the internet for me because I
Yeah.
had to kind of learn by trial and error as I went.
Yeah.
And if I can put other people in a position to where they don't bump their head like I did,
Right.
that's great. That's
Right.
more than work. That's service.
Right. Right. So I do want to touch on this outlining conversation real quick because so for me, I don't. So I do out. Okay, let me say it like this. I started out not outlining, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm
I
gonna
feel
just
like we
paint.
all did.
Yes, I'm gonna just paint it, right? So what I realized though is that when I start outlining, I get stuck on the outlining phase. And so what I started doing
Oh.
was I started pantsing my first draft, and then I would outline out of what I pantsed, and then I
Oh.
would use the outline. So I would know like this is really not even a first draft at this point. This is like just ideas that I'm putting down on the page. And then I outline out of that, and then I do my actual like first draft, right?
Mhm.
So, but what I realized though was that so last year I wrote 2 screenplays, and in one of those I did the pants outline first draft, right? Then the next one I did my outline first, and I did my draft. And I said, I am never ever just pantsing first. I am always going to outline, because when I came back to when I tried to outline out of that first that pants draft, I'm
It was
like,
a headache, wasn't it?
there's some good ideas here, but this is crazy. Like I really could have just outlined these ideas and not wrote all these pages, right? Anyway, I just been wanting to share that with you every time I see you yell about outlining. Anyways.
Oh no, and I'm glad you shared that because I've had a lot of clients. I did a client testimonial yesterday. Richard Davis, one of my clients, and he was saying like at first I did an outline, and then I was so lost, and then I was like, oh my God, you know what? Jessica's right. I do need to outline. Because I don't
Right,
even know what's happening to this character beyond Act 2.
right,
And that's happened to all of us. And I feel like once we really see that, like, oh, I need to outline. Otherwise, I'm going to get to a point where I'm stuck
right,
and I have no idea where I'm going.
right,
Then you're going to be like, okay, creativity does need structure.
right, right.
As
And
much as we hate to admit that.
yeah, yeah, and I think the other piece too, though, is I'm glad that I did it the way that I did it because I feel like sometimes you need to go through, you need to see what works and what doesn't work. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? And so I tried something. I'm like, oh, this feels pretty cool. Then I tried something else, and I'm like, oh, this is better than that, right? And it would have been difficult for me to really understand that without actually having the experience of like doing it and going through it. You know what I'm saying? Um,
exactly.
so, well, let me ask you this: since we talked a little bit about creativity a little bit, what does and I love asking this question because everybody who I've asked this question to gave me a different answer. But what is your definition of creativity?
Wow, I love that question. My definition of creativity is really when people aren't censoring themselves. They're not all
Mm,
in their head and overthinking because I can't tell you how many people I talk to that are like old enough to be our parents, our
yeah,
grandparents, and deep down they want to be creative. They want to be able to use their own autonomy, but they're afraid to because for
yeah,
so many years it's been suppressed. And I don't know if you've seen any of my content talking about the creativity crisis, but
yeah,
it's a real thing. And I forgot the exact percentage, but it's something about how when a child or a student, at least in the United States, gets to the fifth grade, they have had all the creativity stomped out of them for
yeah,
the most part. And I feel like a lot of that is because in the school system, we're taught what to think. We're not taught how to critically think and come to our own conclusions and trust our own intuition. So it's a lot of self doubt going on. Like, and I've talked about this before. I know so many people that are crazy talented that if they were right here, they could paint a portrait of you and I, and it would
mhm,
look totally realistic.
yeah,
And they won't because they don't have that belief in themselves. But if you saw their artwork, you'd be like, okay, how much is it? I want to buy it. That's
right,
how good it is. And
right,
I'm not even exaggerating because I remember when I was in college, and this was like freshman year, like 2009.
yeah,
And I met this girl, and we were in the same math class, really, really talented, but she didn't believe that you could make money from creating. And she would always draw in her sketchbook while we were waiting for like class to start. And I said to her, you can make a lot of money doing that. And you know what she said to me? She said, no, I can't. I'd be living in a cardboard box.
wow,
And she was serious. She wasn't joking. Like she was dead serious.
yeah,
And it was sad to me because it was like, okay, so you're going to major in something you really hate,
yeah,
and then you're going to be miserable. Because when I started my business, believe it or not, do you know who reached out to me the most?
who,
People in STEM, doctors, lawyers, nurses, engineers. I was
mm,
shocked. I was like, oh, you're into screenwriting? And they were like, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. I said, oh, okay. So what made you go into STEM and law? And when they answered, it broke my heart. They were
mm,
like, oh, well, my parents said if I didn't major in these things, they wouldn't support me. And so
right,
I had no choice and to put away childish things because
yeah,
it's a useless hobby.
yeah,
But the truth is, the reason why a lot of creatives give up and don't make it is simply because they just don't understand the business side of it. Which
yeah,
I would say, if you're any kind of creative, get a business coach. They will help you with like
mm,
branding and marketing. I needed that because I didn't know anything about that. I knew my craft. We all know our craft, but when it comes to the business side, that's where we get lost. And
yeah,
that's when we need that guidance.
yeah,
So once we come to terms with that, like, okay, I need to get coached. I don't need to quit my craft. I need to get coached.
Right, right, right. And I think, and going back to the outlining, because I think this is a good illustration of what you're talking about, because
Hmm.
I feel like, when you're in English class and you're doing a paper and they tell you outline it first, right?
Right.
And there's a certain way in which you outline it, right? So
Hmm.
when you step away from that and you're being creative, and somebody says, "Oh, you need to outline," the
It's like,
first
what?
thought is you're thinking about what you had to do in school. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so the association is something that, oh, well, it's not creative anymore. I want to be creative. So that means I'm going to pants it, right? Because you think that this outline has to look a certain way or be a certain
Hmm.
thing, when really all you're saying is map out your story beforehand, right?
Exactly.
And
Just map it out. It's not saying like, oh, don't say that or don't
right,
do that. It's just saying organize your creativity. You're
right,
still being creative, but it's structured.
right. And so
And
in
that way you don't
school,
get lost.
right. And I just say this to illustrate the point that you're making about the creativity being stomped out of us, because is that idea of outlining is no longer this idea of a creative pursuit. It becomes this thing where it's, oh, this is an academic way of doing something, when it's also a part of creativity as well. You know what I mean? Um,
Exactly.
but I do, you said the creativity crisis. Can you talk a little bit more about what that creativity crisis is?
Yeah, a lot of it, and I used to work in the school system, so I saw this a lot, and that's why I got out of it
Mhm.
because there's just so much going on with that. But they don't really give children the room to be creative. And when I say that, I'm not speaking to like, the boarding schools or the high level private schools. They have creative writing classes, but the average like public school in the
Yeah.
United States, no, a
Mhm.
lot of kids don't have that option. And so they almost have to fight for it. Because I remember in high school, my friends and I literally had to fight to start a literary magazine. And at
Wow.
first, the principal didn't want us to. And I'm like, well, why not? We're not putting anything like derogatory in there. It was literally poems, short stories, illustration, paintings. So finally he said yes, but it took him like 6 months to say
Really?
yes to that. Yeah, it was crazy. And this was around like 20, I want to say 2012, like our senior year. It was around, no, no, not 2012. Wow, wrong year. 2008. Our senior year of high school.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
yeah, I was like, wait a minute. No, wrong year. Long day. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was like I was like, he shouldn't have had to take that long. I mean, I could see if we were doing something inappropriate, but we
Yeah,
weren't. It was like literally just showcase talent,
right.
showcase artwork. But yeah, it was such a push. And then it's all this standardized testing and regurgitating information. And I'm not saying that, people don't need math and science. We do. We need English lit. We do. But if you have no way for people to express their creative outlet, that leads to people having a lot of, issues with depression,
Right.
anxiety. And then they get to adulthood and they remember how their parents said to them, oh, put away childish things. So if I'm being told that my creativity is childish by
Yeah,
my parents, I'm
yeah,
going to feel guilty every time I indulge in it.
yeah.
And in my situation, my mom is my biggest cheerleader. Thank God.
Mhm.
My grandma, no. Like, she tried to fight me when it came to me going into screenwriting. She didn't want me to move to California at the time. Like, she got so mad at me. And she
Wow.
was like leading up to me leaving, she would try to start arguments. And I knew what it was. It was her, like, not being able to say, oh, I'm going to miss you. I don't want you to go. Cause I'm the only grandchild. Like, she doesn't
Oh,
have any more. I'm the only child. So
mhm.
she was like, no, no. And I was so excited, right? Because I was 22. I was like, I'm moving to California. And my mom and I were talking about it. And then my grandma had this outburst like, oh, you're moving. I'm sick of hearing about this. And I was like, what is wrong with you?
Right.
Yeah, but then I thought about it the older I got. She was afraid because I'll never forget. I said, I'm going to be a screenwriter in some capacity, one way or another. And she said to me, what if you fail? And she
Mm,
yelled it, right? And at the time, I was like, she thinks I'm going to fail. But now, 10 years later, I'm older. So I realize that was projection. She thinks that she would have failed had she
mm,
embarked on that. And plus, I'm doing something that nobody in my family has ever done, which is why I have a coach. Because when you do stuff like this and you have nobody really in your family that's ever done it, that's when you
right,
need to look outside and be like, okay, who can help me with this? Like,
mm,
your family could be supportive, but if they don't know, they know about as much as you do.
right,
So
right.
it's great to put yourself in that position. And I tell anybody, don't put yourself in a position where you betray yourself by turning your back on your craft, whatever that is. And in my YouTube videos, I always end in my live streams with the quote, the richest place on earth is the graveyard.
Mm,
And it is because so many people have left the earth and they never did what they wanted to do because of what other people told them.
mm. Yeah, and I'll just tell a quick story. When I was in college, I was 19, and I had an English class, and I've always been a writer, like you said,
Mhm.
writing stories, doing things. I love reading. So I'm in this class, and my teacher, she could see that I was like really interested more than everybody else. So she was giving me extra projects. So I remember one
Oh,
day we were sitting. I had just written this. It was an extra paper that nobody else did. I wrote it, handed it in. We talked about it, and she goes, "Well, let me ask you, like, what is it what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking creative writing classes as well, and I plan to get my degree in creative writing. I want to be a writer." And she looks at me and she says, "Oh, you can't do that. You'll never make any money." And I to this day, I don't believe she was. I think she was really trying to help me. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She wasn't trying to tear me down. I
right.
think she was really saying like, I want you to,
Mhm.
be successful. You know what I'm saying? But you need to have this and this. But it broke me, right?
Yeah,
And I think that people can have, even people who have good intentions, they can say things that
exactly.
will throw you off course and derail you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um,
Creative U-turns. That's actually in another book I read earlier this year. I don't know if you've heard of it, The Artist's Way.
oh yeah. The morning
Yeah, that
pages.
book
Come on,
is
let's go.
amazing.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, she's great.
Amazing book where they talk about creative U-turns and how you can even stay in creative victimhood if you're not careful, and how getting the wrong mentor or the wrong coach or the wrong like teacher could really break you and
Yeah.
cause you to not write for years and go
Yep.
on this hiatus.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, that's a real thing, that's a real
Mhm.
thing. And I think this sort of segues this next question, it sort of takes us there. But I saw you talk about one of the major lessons that you had to learn was how to, what did you say? You said stop worrying about the outcome, right? You,
Oh
you had to
yeah.
overcome, this, weren't hyper focusing on how this is going to turn out, right? And even as you were telling that story about, your grandmother and your mother and just some of those conversations you had, I can imagine that that would make it even more difficult to overcome. Like, you want to succeed because your grandmother said you might,
Right.
right? So how did you overcome that? And I think the
So
second part to that question that I want to ask you is, how do you continue to combat that? Because I know it can't just be a one time thing.
Oh yeah. So my coach that I was talking about earlier, and shout out to her. Her name is Allison Sharp. She's amazing. You can
Shout out to
follow her on
Allison.
Instagram. She's literally everywhere. But
Yeah.
the cool thing about her is that she's not just a business coach. She also talks about emotional regulation
Mm,
and staying calm and being emotionally centered. And if you're emotionally dysregulated and chaotic and you're constantly worrying about the outcome, it's going to lead to a nervous breakdown. It's
mm,
going to lead to, you're no longer creating or building from a place of joy. You're building from, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? And that's the worst mental place to be in.
right.
And in one of my courses, the Creative Code, I had two new students join about 2 weeks ago. And that course not only teaches you how to, master creative writing with prompts and exercises, but it also teaches you mindfulness strategies to rejuvenate your mind and,
Mm,
to really center yourself, because people don't realize energetics are a big part of success.
mm,
And a lot of people that we watch that are extremely successful, if you ask them what contributes to it, they're going to name like energetics, and they're
yeah.
also going to be like, yeah, my mindset. And I always make sure that I'm not worrying about the outcome, that I'm doing the action, I'm sticking to the process,
Yeah.
because we really can't control the outcome as
Mm,
human beings. And once we make peace with that, we can at least do our part by doing the action and staying consistent
yeah.
and continuing to show up, because you never really know who's watching you. You
Mm,
really don't. And I've learned that just being on social media and just, with my own projects, you never know. And
yeah.
then one day you're like, oh, you get a message like, hey, I've been watching. And it's like, you have? Where'd you come from?
Right. Right. I mean, the internet, for all its, flaws and the negatives that you
Yeah.
can point to, there's also a very it's a connective thing where, you can connect with somebody across the world, you know what I'm
Oh, yeah.
saying, that you never would have been able to before, you know what I'm saying? Um, Real quick, let me shout out some people. Jerron, what's good, brother? Danny J. Quick, you already know what time it is. Um, yes. So, but no, I completely agree with what you just said. Can you talk a little bit more about the Creative Code program that you have?
Oh, sure. So the full name of it, it's a self-paced course, and it's called The Creative Code Unlock, Unblock, Unleash. So it's
Okay.
all about releasing your creativity, because so many people have creativity blocks that are keeping them from actually doing the writing, because they're in their head and they're overthinking. And this course helps them get to a mental place where now they can create from a place of joy. One of my students, Miss Darlene, she's always in my lives, and she ended up purchasing it a few weeks ago. And literally within like 30 minutes after she purchased it, she was able to come up with three of her top ideas, and she was able to flesh out her main idea. And ever since then, she's been writing just every single day before bed. Creativity has been flowing from her, because in that course, I actually give a secret that I have that teaches you how to not censor yourself in
Mhm.
order to come up with your next idea. Because as writers, we always hear, oh, well, I don't know what to write about. I don't know. With my method, you'll know within 30 minutes what
Mm,
to write about, because I do it in such a way where the rule is write it down,
mm,
even if you think it's stupid, even
mm.
if you think, oh, why would I write that down? Because it silences the inner critic. So it forces you to not even listen to that negative voice anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds great. That sounds great. Any writers who are watching and listening, definitely check that out. There are in the show notes all of Jessica's links to her social medias, LinkedIn, Instagram. I think TikTok was on there. But yeah, definitely go follow her and check all of those things out, because she has some great resources. Um, what is what's your goal? Like 5 years from now, where do you want to be?
Oh, that's a great question. So 5 years from now, I want to really build up my business to where I'm helping more writers, not just in the US, but on a global level. And I
Mm,
have been able to reach more clientele, especially through LinkedIn, when it comes to people from overseas, people in the UK,
yeah,
people in countries in Africa, so all over really. And I also want to get more of my work out there and apply to different fellowships as well. I have
yeah,
some that I have on my list that, I'm waiting until, it opens up again. And then I'm
yeah,
going to apply as well, because at the end of the day, I'm a writer too.
yeah.
So,
Well, and that's one question I did want to ask you about. How do
Mhm.
you balance the writing for yourself and then also the teaching that you do for other writers? Like, what's that balance like for you?
Oh, yeah. So at first I was horrible at it. I'll be transparent,
Mhm.
especially in the beginning stages of starting my business because
Yeah.
that was so new.
Mhm.
But then I understood, like, no, I have to really structure my time. And
Yeah.
the app that I use, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Todoist. And so
Mhm.
that really helps me schedule everything out. Like, okay, from this time to this time, I'm marketing, I'm selling, I'm doing stuff in my business, and then from this time to this time, I'm writing. And
Mm.
having that consistent schedule really helps me stay on track.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. That's something that I have not figured out because I thought maybe I might want to do something like that because I do like talking to writers. I love, just talking shop and having conversations about structure and all those type of things. But I haven't figured out that balance between the teaching part of it and the
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
doing it part of it. You know what I'm saying? So maybe that'll come one day. We'll see what happens. Um, but let me ask you this: um, as as a writer, I think something that's interesting. I listened to a podcast, and on the podcast, one of the guys says that writing is it's an interesting industry to be in because it's one of the few crafts or industries where failure is the norm, right?
Right.
So, for example, if you're a doctor and
Ooh,
you lose 90% of your patients,
ooh, yeah.
that
Human
doesn't
life.
work. You probably go into prison, right?
Oh, yeah.
But as
And
a
don't let it be a
writer,
surgeon.
right, right. But as a writer, you 90% failure rate is I mean that's actually probably good. Like if you get 10% of your things sold, I mean that's probably doing pretty well. So
Yeah, then
how
the
do you what's
majority.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's your approach to failure? How do you handle failure?
So I'll be transparent. I used to be afraid of failure. I used to hate it. And I remember when I was a teenager, like I was this type of student where I got A's in everything except math. I would get the
Mm,
one B. And I was about 16 years old. And my mom said to me, no, 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 this is good. Now you know what failure feels like. And, I'm 16, so I'm looking at her crazy. And I'm like, I don't want to know what failure feels like. Are you
right,
crazy? She's
right,
like, no, 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 you'll understand soon. And
yeah.
then when I went to grad school, there were a lot of people from like other countries, and not to like disparage like a culture or anything like that.
Oh, don't
It
get
was
us
a lot,
canceled now. Don't get us canceled. Go ahead.
I know, but it was like, I won't say the culture, but like it was a lot of people from cultures that if you got less than like a straight A plus, it was considered failure.
Oh, for
And I
sure.
remember that what was it? It was a video editing class that we had to take to up our
Mm,
skill set.
mm,
And I remember she got an A minus. She had a
mm,
meltdown in
mm,
front of the class and yelled at the professor saying, I demand you change. And he was like, no. And plus he was old school, baby boomer. So he wasn't budging. And he
right.
was like, you're doing all this over an A minus. Are you serious? And then I remembered what my mom told me years ago. And I was like, oh my God, you were right. She said, yeah, if you had never failed at anything, that would have been you. You would have been that
Wow.
grown woman freaking out over an A minus because you made straight A's your whole identity. And
Mm,
a lot of people do that because I remember I had a client in the early stages of my business, 2020 or 2021ish.
mm,
And, she paid for development notes from me and I delivered the notes. And the way I am, I'll follow up with you like, hey, how's it going? Do you still need clarification on the notes? And she was like, Jessica, I'll be honest, I didn't read the notes. I said, well, why not? And she was like, well, I've always gotten straight A's and,
mm,
I'm just too scared to read the note. And I said, no, 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 it's okay. Like, this is room for opportunity. It doesn't mean you failed, it just means tweak this.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you are a failure as a person, but a lot of people feel that way. And I was actually talking about a few months ago to this industry executive that I connected with on LinkedIn, super
I
successful.
gotta get on LinkedIn. I'm sorry. I
Get
gotta
on
get on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I gotta do this, but go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, get on LinkedIn ASAP. My business coach, thank you, Allison. She yelled at us to get on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Get on there ASAP because there's a lot of creatives on there
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
LinkedIn.
for sure.
Um, and he was telling me that his dad used to ask him and his sister at the dinner table, so what did you two fail in today? And they would tell
Mm,
him, and he would give them each a high five, like, good. Now you know what doesn't work, so go figure out what does work.
yeah, yeah.
And that's how we have to approach it. But I feel like because of the school system, we're taught, oh my God, failure. And that's why I get so much pushback, especially now in my content when I'm telling people, hey, we're going into this new gig economy. You're going to have to build your own door. You're going to have to create your own opportunities. And people are so afraid of failure that when I say stuff like that, it's emotionally triggering. And I don't take it personal because I know like they're not mad at me per se. They're scared of the thought of, oh my gosh, I'm putting myself out here and to get rejected, to get no, to get this. I'm like, if you saw how many no's I get a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you still keep going.
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing about failure too, though, is that failure can mean so many different things for so many different
Oh
people.
yeah.
So when I worked at a restaurant, it's called the Flying Biscuit. It's down here in Atlanta.
Oh wow.
I worked there, and my boss, he told me, or the owner of the store, he told me a story, and he said, basically, he was telling me like the way his dad trained his kids was he was really rich, and what he would say is, he'd give us money, we would start a business,
Mm.
and then when we started the business, when we failed, he would bring us, we would have a debrief, and then he would say, all right, cool, let's start another one. And then they would just keep doing the same thing. And
Wow.
each time he was getting better at business because they were just starting businesses, failing, learning, and doing something, right?
I
But
love that.
I think about the people that I grew up with, and if you were to fail at a business, that probably meant you lost everything, right? You
Oh
didn't have
yeah.
anybody to give more money to keep going forward,
Right.
right? So it's this, it's almost like when we start having these conversations around privilege, right? Some people have the privilege to fail, right? And not everybody feels like they have that same privilege. I think once we get around, we can get over that, and we can say, listen, failure is failure, right? We can always find a way to bounce back, right?
Oh
But I
yeah.
think because of what it means to some people, it's difficult to move around. I see this when I'm playing video games. I'm playing video games, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to mess up, I don't want to die.
I
And then
know, right?
I watch these videos of these guys playing games, and they just be dying. And they're like, oh, I'm gonna get it next time. And they just keep going. I'm like, oh, this is how you get good,
Yeah.
by
That's
dying
the
and coming back.
mindset that you have to have. Like, okay, get back up.
Get back up, do it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I just think that's very insightful. What you brought to the table around that. So I have one more segment that I do with everybody. It's called the
Sure.
one. The first question I usually ask, what's one book you think everybody should read? But I'm gonna ask you, what's one screenplay you think everybody should read?
Ooh, that's hard. Well, actually, no, it's not that hard. I mention it a lot. You know the movie, right? Good Will Hunting from back in the
Yes,
day.
of course.
Yeah, I would say people should read that. And the reason I say that is because it's a great shining example of what it looks like when the hero of your story is also his own worst enemy. And if
Mm,
you know the movie, you know what I'm talking about because he was brilliant. I mean, no formal education, no formal training. He just knew how to do all these complicated high level math problems.
yep.
And when he got the opportunity, like it came knocking, he was like, no, because of what he went through in the past.
Yeah.
He internalized, oh, I'm nothing. I don't deserve good things. And
Mm,
even when people were like, no, 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 we want to pay you thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to come work for our corporation promotion and to
Right.
move out of Southie and all this stuff. No, 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 no. I don't deserve that. I'm a
Mm.
nobody. I'm nothing. I'm this, I'm that. You know, my foster father did this to me.
Yeah.
And there was no real enemy other than himself in that movie because he kept telling himself, it's my fault that this happened to me. It's my fault. It's my fault. And toward the end of it, with Ben Affleck's character, his friend was kind of the wise mentor. And this is why I tell people the mentor doesn't always have to be like an elderly person.
Right.
Sometimes it can be your peer. Sometimes it can be your best friend. It could be your sibling. It could be somebody that's in your age group. And he said to him, you know, if you stay here and you're still living here, I will unalive you.
Mm.
I'm not trying to get you canceled. I will
Yeah.
unalive you. um, you
Yeah.
know, because what? Like, I do anything to have what you have. So with the rest of these guys, like, stop saying that you're staying here because it's a good, honest job.
Right.
Like,
Right.
stop.
Right.
And
Right.
that gave him the kick in the head that he needed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, that's a good one. That's a good one. I need
Oh
to read
yeah.
that. I need to read that one again.
Yeah, that one's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. What's one word you want your legacy described as?
Ooh, let me think about that for a second. Resilient.
That's a good one. Why resilient?
Resilient. Because, you know, things happen. And here's one thing I always realized: life is always going to life. And a lot of us as human beings, we spend so much time waiting for the perfect moment. Like, oh, I'm going to start this when this happens, or I'm going to do this when this happens. It's like, no, just start now,
Yep.
because there's never going to be a perfect moment. I mean, I started my business in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic.
Yep.
I was like, well, if I don't do it now, then. And the other day I was going through like connecting with old clients, and I thought, what if I hadn't started this business? I wouldn't have any old clients to connect with.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why I always tell people, stop waiting on the perfect moment, the
Yeah.
perfect chance, because there is no perfect chance. There's always going to be some reason why you can't do it. But at the same time, you don't want to get to, I always tell my clients, you don't want to get to an elderly age and you're having all this regret. Like, I wish I would have done this. And
Mm,
man, I had a chance to do that. But because of what this person said, or because of my own fear, I didn't do it.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I always stress that.
Yeah. It's like that quote. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago.
Ooh,
The second
exactly.
best time is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I love that quote. I don't
Love
know who
it.
said it. I don't know who said it. I think I just read it on a meme somewhere. Maybe somebody just put
Yeah,
it
I
on
want
a
to look that
meme.
up.
I don't know, but it's a good one. It's a good one. What's one thing that you would change about your creative journey?
I would say stop worrying, at least in my journey. Don't worry about like frivolous stuff like vanity metrics. And that's one thing my coach taught me. Because you know how when we get on social media, especially years ago, like 2020, 2021 ish, I was like, oh, I'm not getting as many views. I'm not getting as much engagement. Somebody's watching. They
Mm,
might not comment, but they're watching you
mhm.
religiously. And
Yeah.
that's what I've noticed about people over the years. Your serious people, your serious clients, they're not necessarily commenting like crazy.
Yeah.
But they're watching you. Every time you go live, they're watching. You might
Yeah.
not know that they're right there watching, but out of the blue one day, they might be like, oh, hey, where's your link? Or, oh, hey, where's this?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you were watching? Where'd you come from? They, oh, yeah, I was watching you for a long time and now I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this is going to go hand in hand with what you just said. But what's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Mm, don't overthink things and stop worrying about the outcome, especially because
Mhm.
I used to give myself so much anxiety that was unnecessary by, worrying about, oh my God, the outcome. What if this doesn't happen? What if that? And every time we what if when it's negative. But how
Yeah.
about we what if to something positive? What
What
if
if
I
it works
attract
out?
my
Right.
people? What if this is a great move? What if this person is interested? What
Yeah.
if I'm able to pitch to this person?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
a muscle that we have to get used to using because it's so easy, unfortunately, to go negative.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's easy to go negative because we're used to going negative, right? We're
Yeah,
used to people saying, and a lot of those times, those thoughts that we have are really the voices of what other people have told us before, right? And so, um,
exactly.
yeah, I think that's right on the money. Um, Again, this might go hand in hand with what you just said, but what's one thing that you want everyone that sees or hears this to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with just the mindset of your creativity is valuable and you're not only doing yourself a disservice, you're doing the people that actually need you a
Yeah.
grave disservice because
Mm,
I can't tell you how many people and this happened about when did this happen to me? 2022 where
mm,
I lost my old Instagram account and I had to create a new one. So the one I have now, it's my new one, right? That I've been building up again. And I met up with some of my old clients and they were like, "Oh my God, you're back. I was looking for you. I don't want to work with any other screenwriting coach." And I was like, now, see, imagine if I quit. Like, they didn't want to work with anybody else. And sometimes, like, I've had to realize this sometimes your people are meant to work with you and only you. And
yeah.
it's a connection, it's a spiritual thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Um, is there anything that you want to plug? Any other things that you want to let people know about before we get out of here?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, my top level program is the Script Mentorship Program. And that's where you work with me for 4 months. And during that 4 months, it's a group coaching program. So, you'll get feedback from me for the entire duration. We're working on your portfolio. And we're also learning the business aspect of it as well. And I'm adding some more things to the curriculum too, like how screenwriters can pivot into video games, like writing for games and writing for podcasts, like what you have, and also for YouTube channels. Corporations writing their advertisements and how they can have all these skill sets in their back pocket in the event of, God forbid, another strike. And also, contract negotiations, how to vet agents and managers. And then the amazing thing about this program is that once you enroll, you also get access to my exclusive database of industry contacts.
Oh,
So you get access to literary agents, managers, film financiers, pitch deck specialists, producers, and people that you can network with once you graduate from the program. And
right.
then you'll have a body of work to show them.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
That sounds amazing. Definitely check out the links that's in the show description. You can follow her. You can see everything that she's got going on. Um, I just want to say before we get out of here, I used to follow you years ago when you
It was on
first
my
started
old page. Yeah.
your own page, and I
I
did not
remembered you.
understand. Yeah, I did not understand why I wasn't following you anymore.
That's why, because they took my page away. And Instagram, this is why I say to anybody, get a business coach, because I had an email list. That's how I was able to like still connect with my old clients and
Yeah,
my future ones. But when I lost that, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because I was still relatively new in business.
yeah,
So I was like, oh my God, Instagram is like my main one. And
yeah,
now you see that I'm everywhere. I'm
yeah,
not just on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok. And today my coach was like, oh, get on Twitch because,
yeah,
TikTok might not be here come January because it
yeah,
got sued again. So
mm,
I have to figure out a new place to go
yeah,
live. So it's
yeah,
all about being proactive, being
yeah.
prepared. So that's
But
why you weren't following me.
yeah, no, I thought it was weird, but I just wanted to say when I found your page again, I was deeply impressed by the growth that I saw. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Being able to see, well, I felt like it was where you started, and then to see where you are now, just the confidence, the just everything that you're doing. I just want to say I appreciate you, your inspiration. And I think it's great the way in which you share your information and how you're building up the community, the writer community, and just the information that you give. I think is so valuable and it's so needed and it's necessary. So I
Thank
just want to
you.
make sure I let you know that for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate you coming through tonight to have this conversation.
Yeah, it
I've
was
had fun.
great.
Wonderful. To the watchers, to the listeners, thank you so much for being here tonight. Again, definitely check out Jessica's work, all her socials and everything that she's got going on. If you enjoyed this conversation, like, subscribe, share this with somebody. And as always, I love you. I love you. I love you. Peace.